First of all, I would like to join the thanks which some of the speakers have expressed today to ASPI for organizing this very interesting and remarkable conference. And I think already the first day has paid off. And hopefully our session will also be an interesting one. Going into the design of the future submarine program more deeply, as we will do now, given that we have this in mind, I think it has been a good idea to put somebody in the chair who is the head of a shipbuilding company or system integrator. And of course, I have heard the last remarks of Admiral Duché in the last session, and sitting here, I have to balance it by extending to everybody an invitation to Kiel. So please, if you come all the way from Australia to Europe, look at the distance between Cherbourg and Kiel. It is not too far away. Then at least touch both places. Now, I would like to introduce the speakers of this session. It is first of all to my right, Mr. Simon Todd, who is the IPT leader of the C1000 program, and Dr. Chris Edmonds, who is a design manager of the future submarine program. Both gentlemen have deep roots and experience in various UK-based submarine programs and are deeply knowledgeable about everything which has to do with submarine technology and design. And so we are looking forward to that. And I would like to ask Mr. Simon Todd to start, please.
Thank you. When I was offered this spot to speak in the middle of last week, I couldn't really turn it down. In fact, I was very pleased to accept it. But I was given about 20 seconds to decide what the title was. And it wasn't decided for me. I was told and agreed. So if I say anything that aligns with the title, it's purely coincidence. And secondly, very unusually for me, I'm going to talk to a prepared script. Not for the same reasons as the Minister this morning, but to ensure that I cover all of the things that I want to say. But it has a secondary benefit to send a message in that I have no visual aids. And that might be rather disappointing to an audience who wants to hear a talk about the future submarine design. But the truth of the matter is that all of the design work that we're now undertaking inside the IPT is classified as secret, and it will not be discussed in public. And that is of necessity, and it's the nature of the business, of which I make no apology. So, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. And what I'm going to talk about is matters that consume my every waking moment, or certainly have done for the last year. And that is how to design a regionally superior conventional future submarine for Australia. Well, that's relatively straightforward, you think, at a manageable level of risk, and that is not. But before I get to the critical issues associated with the options for designing the future submarine, I would first like to provide some background and context to this address. So first I'm going to talk about the integrated project team itself, because for many of you, you'll know very little about who we are or what we do, and particularly its role in submarine design, the mandate to which we are operating, and also the key assumptions that underpin our current program of work. I will then talk about our plans for formal industry consultation, particularly those elements that affect design activities, and in so doing, I hope to provide some insight as to why Australia should consider leading a submarine design activity, or indeed developing a sovereign submarine design capability. Later, I will touch on one of the major challenges that we face, that of program affordability, and what we can and should and are doing now to address it, and of course what we cannot do at the moment as well. And I will also necessarily, therefore, talk about its relationship with the program schedule. And finally, perhaps because I can't help myself, I'm going to say a few words about submarine numbers. What is and what is not important to feed the demands of the near-term program. But first, to my beloved IPT. The Future Submarine IPT is based in Adelaide, South Australia, which is exactly where it should be. Though as its leader, it's rather academic to me, because I spend increasing amounts of time lured by the attractions of Canberra. The IPT has a much wider remit now than when it was originally envisaged or publicised. And as we have been travelling on our voyage of discovery over the past year, it is becoming ever more evident that although our technical focus is on new submarine design, the majority of our products will be used whatever design option the government selects for this programme. The team was founded in March last year with one person, and that was me. It gradually grew to a point at which it became operational in September of last year, and at that time, it had around 25 people. Now, it's around 60. Now, you should think that as the team leader, I should know exactly how many people there are in this team. But with its nature of some of the members being double-hatted, some being part-time, and some new members joining at the rate of about 2 a week at the moment, and we're never quite certain when they're going to turn up because they travel long distances to relocate to be there, I don't actually know. So for the moment, about 60 will have to do. The team comprises a mixture of DMO, DSDO, CDG, and the Navy, but industry dominates, and most of it, I am very pleased to say, is Australian. There are 6 of us from the UK, and depending on who exactly turns up this week, we should have 2 from the US. It's taken some time, but I'm very pleased that we're there. But what I should say as well, that there is considerable US engagement through the NAVC peer review program that we have established, who have now visited the IPT for 2 significant engagements, one in June last year, and the last one at the end of February this year. The next one is programmed to take place in August. I have to be a little cautious when I refer to the UK contingent, because one of our numbers is technically a Scot. And if the Scots vote for independence this September, we have pointed out to this individual that he will no longer be in the UK, he might lose the UK sponsorship for his security clearance, and he might no longer be able to work on this programme. For the record, I am English. Our broad remit is to get the Commonwealth to a position where it is equipped to direct and manage the future submarine design and build programme, whatever option is selected. This we are doing by generating an organisation with all the necessary information, infrastructure and know-how to operate as an intelligent customer, and you will have heard that phrase used a few times today. And as you would expect, we are doing this increasingly with collaboration with the DSTO. And just to avoid confusion, here's a quote from my directive. The IPT is deemed to operate as a Commonwealth entity that is part of the C1000 programme. Brackets above the line, close brackets. Central to the IPT's programme is the generation of what we refer to as a design brief, about which you will hear much more from my colleague Chris Edmonds in his presentation that follows this. Apart from his detailed design brief, we are required quite naturally to generate cost forecasts and schedules associated with a new submarine design. These you would naturally expect. But in addition, we are also directed to, and here's a short list, to deliver a procurement strategy for the delivery of whichever design option the government eventually selects, be that option 4 or any of the other previously identified option sets. Second one, a key outcome of the IPT's activity is to grow Australia's sovereign submarine enterprise capabilities and capacity for the future. You, that's me, are to develop plans to achieve this end to the maximum extent possible. Now, I do notice with some amusement that the title of this presentation or this talk is Requirements Definition for Australia. And one of the rules of developing requirements is that they're measurable, and I'm very pleased to say that that one isn't. To engage and consult with industry and government organisations in gathering information to facilitate the formation of the total national enterprise that will deliver Australia's future submarine capability. And to advise on appropriate organisational and commercial arrangements that would enable the C1000 programme. So as you can see from that, the IPT has moved a very long way from being a separate team operating below the line at arm's length, producing two concept designs, a baseline and an enhanced representation of the 2009 white paper. It is now an organisation that is operating above the line and right at the heart and right across the whole of the C1000 programme. Now, if for some reason you take a particular dislike to me and wish to get a rise out of me, then I suggest you use the phrase within my hearing, option 4 IPT, which occasionally I do. All I've said now and will say today is based on a number of key assumptions and derived requirements. First one is that the Commonwealth intends to maintain a regionally superior conventional submarine capability. That's fine, you've heard that. Principally enabled through continued access to sensitive technologies sourced from the US and the UK. That the Commonwealth places considerable value on its strategic military alliance with the US and on submarine interoperability in particular. Now, what that means is that our emerging procurement strategy must therefore recognise and accommodate the security requirements and the operational constraints that accompany these access privileges, and that we must take great care not to compromise this special relationship with the US Navy. Next, that Australia's submarine requirement is sufficiently unique that we would be unwise to assume that it can be fulfilled by an off-the-shelf solution. Now, please note the careful wording there, as we know that we still have work to really thoroughly understand the full range of MOTS options that are available to us. But there's a clear implication there that we should get ourselves prepared to commission and manage a new design, albeit with extensive use of proven and off-the-shelf equipments and systems. And the second, with such a unique requirement, is that we should not plan for, nor should we expect, any export market for the future submarine solution. And then, that Australia wishes to exercise sovereign rights over its submarine capability, by which I mean that it expects to operate and sustain its submarine capability without seeking permission from or being overly dependent upon nation-states whose interests are not necessarily aligned with Australia or its close allies. And I just want to be clear about the use of this word sovereignty. The Minister spoke in his speech this morning of the need to exercise sovereign design control. And as you just heard, my directive requires me to grow sovereign submarine enterprise capabilities. I would like to stress, however, that these sovereignty requirements are only there because we need to do some particular things to maintain regionally superior submarine capability, to exercise independence and self-reliance, and, if necessary, to manage a new design. Sovereign design capability comes at a cost. It is not a requirement in its own right, and the requirements that we will generate are as a result of higher level needs. And there's one more assumption as background that it's worthy of mention at this point, and you've heard it already, that Australia's future submarines will be assembled in South Australia. Excuse me. That means that any design created overseas must be imported and matched to Australian shipyard practices. We should not underestimate the design effort required to do that successfully. So back to the plot. With that as background, the skills and knowledge being mustered in the IPT and also in the DSDO around this particular program are now regarded as the basis from which, firstly, to grow a Commonwealth organisation to manage the design aspects of this program, and secondly, to seed an emerging industrial organisation with submarine design studies and other related tasks to enable an effective and timely mobilisation to deliver this program. We are currently in the process of planning a 5-stage transition. 5 stages perhaps not important, but it's quite a complex transition, to consolidate and build on this initial capability, to run that in parallel with the current early design activities, the early concept work that we're undertaking in the IPT, well into the detailed concept design stage, so that we will be ready to enter preliminary design in late 2016, early 2017. That's dates that are consistent with the in-service dates mentioned by the Minister this morning, with a fully functioning intelligent customer organisation, an established and fully mobilised lead commercial organisation, and an overseas design house engaged to support the design of the submarine to meet the Australian requirement. And it is to this design house engagement and industry consultation that I now turn. You heard the Minister say in his address that he has agreed to Defence actively and formally engaging with key industry sectors on this programme. To this end, Defence will shortly be issuing a formal notice of intention to consult, precise words, and you will hear more about this from David Gould tomorrow morning in his address, and particularly the engagement that we plan with potential Tier 1 suppliers. I will talk now about the consultation that we intend to conduct with overseas design houses. I keep being reminded that Australia has no track record of designing submarines. The Oberons are bought off the shelf from the UK, and the Collins class was commissioned from a Swedish design house. It is inconceivable, therefore, that Australia could undertake the future submarine design without significant overseas help. For this reason, and to contain technical risks within acceptable bounds, we intend to engage a proven submarine design house to assist with the design of our future submarines. Now, as an aside, all of this rather prompts a question, at least it does to me. Given the obvious risks in undertaking a new submarine design, why would Australia feel compelled to take the leading role in its production? And why would it feel compelled to develop its own sovereign submarine design capability? I'm going to return to that topic a bit later, and Chris Edmonds will do so in his presentation. Our task over the remainder of this year in the programme is to reach a consensus on the nature of this design house engagement. It must be one that represents an acceptable balance of risk to the Commonwealth. It's a balance of risk between the certainty of being able to deliver a workable design against the certainty of preserving access to the critical technologies that we require to deliver a capability edge. Despite being offered many opinions on this particular matter, I can see no obvious clear outcome to this particular set of analysis and the route that we're going to plough over the remainder of this year. It may not be the wicked problem to which the Minister referred this morning, but it is certainly a particularly vexing and important and strategic one, and it is right at the heart of the programme now. So here are some of the issues that we need to resolve and reconcile in the relatively short term so that we can maintain the momentum on the programme to deliver in the dates that we require. As I said earlier, we are currently of the view that delivering a capability edge in region requires the use of US and UK combat system and stealth technology. We absolutely must understand how engagement of an overseas design house might impact on our ability to access these key technologies. Secondly, I would assert that experience in Australia and overseas tells us a couple of things. The first is that importing a ship design from overseas for successful production in Australia demands extensive in-country design activity, even for a MOTS design, with Anzac frigates and AWD as notable examples of lessons learnt. And for us to be able to operate and sustain submarines safely and effectively, we must acquire both a comprehensive understanding of the basis of whole boat design and unfettered access to any associated intellectual property. This was not achieved for Collins and remains an issue today. Thirdly, whatever might be the stated intent, any significant engagement with a design house of any flavour will be the start of a long-term relationship. It is essential, therefore, that the chosen organisation has sufficient commercial stability and strength in its primary, by which I mean home market, to be able to support the Australian Future Submarine programme from a solid base. That Australia does not find itself inadvertently underwriting another nation's sovereign submarine capability through being its prime customer. And fourthly, the principal reason for engaging a design house lies in the benefits of accessing an experienced team backed by well-rehearsed and proven design standards and engineering processes. However, the Commonwealth is currently in the process of acquiring its own set of submarine design standards, tailored through need to meet Australia's specific, unique environment, specifically as they relate to safety regulation and certification, legal requirements, and also to submarine operability. And Admiral Samet, in his address, made reference to the way in which Australian submarines are crewed, operating for long periods of time, a long way away from base. We need to understand whether design standards developed for, say, European coastal submarines are appropriate for Australia's future long-range and deep-water submarine design and the regulatory environment in which it operates. Should we find it necessary to mandate the use of these Australian standards in the future submarine design, then we would also need to understand how this might compromise the effectiveness of a design house's engineering workforce. Now, the irony of an established submarine designer being told how to design submarines by a novice isn't lost on me. But there are a number of examples of naval programs that I can think of that have suffered through insufficient client direction and control. And fifthly, whatever concept is selected for the future submarine, Australia by then will have its own design brief, if only as an encapsulation of its design requirements. And it is likely and it is proper for Australia to commit considerable engineering and technical resource to ensure both compliance with the brief and to acquiring sufficient technology transfer and knowledge of the design intent to enable Australia to discharge its responsibilities both as an owner and as a user. Now, to some design houses, this model could be at odds with their own business objectives. We will therefore require assurance that whatever business model we propose, it is commercially attractive to all parties: the Commonwealth and its principal industrial partners, the overseas design house in question, and its parent government. This design house consultation is planned to run in parallel with the Tier 1 consultations this year to help us form a view of the nature of design house engagement that best suits Australia's needs. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, I want to be quite clear and would like to stress that we are not seeking to select a particular design house at this stage. This is a consultation process, not a solicitation process. Any solicitation at this moment, from where I'm standing now, is at least a year away. And now, we can hardly have a conversation about requirements without saying something about money. So with some fear and trepidation, I'll venture into this minefield. The Minister made it abundantly clear in his speech that Australia's submarine capability must be affordable. Consistent with the Minister's requirements, we are particularly mindful of the need to address affordability from the outset and also to work to an achievable timetable. But we are currently working to no specific affordability requirement. Given that we have yet to confirm the level of submarine capability that we are being asked to acquire, the design of the submarine that is best suited to meet it, the number of submarines that we are being asked to procure, and the means by which we will acquire them, I think it's understandable that our cost forecast at this stage lacks some precision. To date, we have necessarily been working with some fairly crude parametrics. But now that we have an established team working up reasonably detailed, early concept designs, and we are starting to generate detailed illustrations of particular point solutions around a narrowing requirement set, we are in a position to be more precise. A word of caution, though. There are still a large number of unknowns that will remain in this program for some time, so I would be really disappointed to hear of my team or anybody talking to me about cost estimates in terms of accurate estimates. We are honing down and we're getting better understanding, but no more than that. The C1000 program now has a dedicated cost forecasting and cost management team, and our understanding of program cost is improving on a daily basis. Having said that, not knowing precisely how much the future submarines are going to cost to design, build and sustain does not prevent us from addressing affordability and cost challenge now. So here are some of the practical things that we can and are doing to address affordability in the program. The first was to challenge the 2009 white paper requirement. So a year ago, we had an embryonic set of requirements that reflected the aspirations of the 2009 white paper that, from our interpretation at least, could only be satisfied by technologies that are out of reach to Australia, by which I mean an SSN, albeit a small one. Our early attempts in the team, and Chris particularly, to understand how this requirement could be met with a conventional submarine caused us some difficulties and pointed us, like at least two groups before us, to large, unwieldy, and therefore very expensive designs. We have moved a long way since those early days, and now, working closely with the Capability Development Group, the STO and the Navy, we are focusing in on a requirement that is best currently categorized as contemporary Collins. And it is in this process of articulating and detailing what contemporary Collins means in a requirement set that the embryonic Commonwealth Client Organisation today, the IPT and the DSTO, have a key role of exercising continuous cost challenge, not least because we are the organisation who has the best knowledge and understanding of the costs of designing and building these submarines. I know from first-hand experience that this is not a comfortable place to operate, and it is certainly not conducive to making friends. But frankly, that's not what we're paid for. So if we are serious about containing affordability on this program, then we must encourage and enable the wider client organisation, and by that I mean the Navy organisations as well, to keep requirements in check. It is in all of our interests. The next one may seem a little odd at first. One of the lessons learnt from the UK is that the primary lever for controlling program cost is hitting the schedule. And for us, that can translate into tight control over requirements change and generating stability in the requirements set. So the two things that we can do now are to achieve that stability in the requirement set through certainty of design information. Control your weight like your life depends upon it, and avoid developmental items where you can. For to quote a UK colleague who is not here at the moment, but was in Australia a couple of years ago and is now running a UK program, the evil of everything new is the enemy of complex design programs. Chris, I am sure, will say more about this for later, because if you want to get a rise out of him, then try saying something like, oh, option 4, that's the all-new developmental design, isn't it? Those are truly poisonous words to us, and they certainly do not feature in the IPT's vocabulary. And the second thing we must do now is to ensure that the program is founded with a particularly robust design change process and requirements change process. One that manages inevitable design changes born of necessity, because there will be, and the other one that resists all others. So it won't surprise you to learn then that our embryonic design management arrangements for the future submarine enterprise are centering on uncompromising weight management, high technology readiness thresholds, and design change management controls. Now, as I said earlier, I would turn briefly to the question of why Australia should consider leading the future submarine design and establishing its own sovereign design capability, albeit with overseas help. Chris, in his talk, is going to give you a full list of examples, but I'm going to steal some of his thunder. Sorry, Chris. At the top of the list, and is very close to my heart, is submarine safety. Australian safety legislation places specific responsibilities on designers and operators. The Commonwealth of Australia Work Health and Safety Act 2011 explicitly defines the obligations to ensure that hazards are identified and are either eliminated or minimised so far as is reasonably practicable. The Act demands the demonstration of due diligence, which means taking every precaution that is reasonable in the circumstances to protect health, safety and welfare of all workers and others who could be put at risk from work carried out as part of the business or undertaking, and that includes building, maintaining and operating submarines. For the future submarine programme, we are therefore required to explicitly demonstrate that we understand the hazards associated with submarine design and all fundamental inputs to capability, and can clearly show how these hazards have been addressed in the design to either eliminate or reduce them so far as is reasonably practicable. These due diligence obligations and the arguments required to substantiate and demonstrate so far as is reasonably practical drive the need to fundamentally and thoroughly understand the submarine design, its design intent and its operating philosophy. Now, we are taking legal advice on the implications for the full range of procurement options available. But our current view is that as there are no internationally recognised standards of submarine seaworthiness, as exist for surface ships and for airworthiness, Australia has little option but to acquire this thorough understanding of the submarine design, its intent and operating philosophy. As I said, Chris will give more examples later. And because I can't help myself, in a final reflection on the Minister's address, I would like to turn to the vexed issue of submarine numbers, particularly as it relates to the immediate needs of the programme. At this stage in the acquisition process, we do not need a commitment to the final number of submarines to be procured, apart from an assumption that is consistent with avoiding a capability gap. And a commitment to that number is only required when we need to place orders. Commitments beyond the current capability only become an issue after the early 2030s, driven by the need either to start detailed design, if you need to design a new batch, or to place orders for long lead production items for those later submarines. So I think we can expect the debate on numbers to continue for some considerable time. But there is one specific indication of scale linked to a near-term commitment to which I'd like to draw your attention. We are just about to start on the journey to establish an enduring sovereign submarine enterprise. And in formalizing the contractual relationship between the Commonwealth and its Tier 1 lead commercial organization, which is currently planned for sometime in 2016, we will need an endorsed assumption on the scale of the submarine program in Australia. Such an assumption, as it's reflected in the foundation contracts for the enterprise, will attract liabilities for the Commonwealth. Small in comparison to the cost of a batch of submarines, but liabilities nonetheless. So in parallel with the industry consultation this year, we will be developing an understanding of the minimum build and design refresh rates required to sustain a viable submarine design and build enterprise in Australia, and the cost premium that such a provision might attract. This is to enable the contract negotiations to proceed against a background of informed analysis. And that's all I really have to say. So thank you all for your patience and your indulgence. I'm sorry if this appears slightly underprepared, but the opportunity to speak only arose in the middle of last week. I have been as open and as honest with you as I can, given the highly sensitive nature of submarine programs, and this one in particular. In the very least, I hope that I've given you some insight into the issues that keep us awake at night. And I also hope that you have learnt a little bit more about the nature and the workings of the Future Submarine Projects team in Adelaide. Thank you once again.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. As it says in my biographical details, I'm a veteran of several submarine programs, and you always know when you're getting old, when for the second or third time you hear people saying, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get involved in the start of a program. So I am feeling my age a bit, but I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to be involved in this program and to address to this knowledgeable audience on my favourite subject. I'm going to disappoint you, just as everybody else has, because I'm not going to put up any pictures. Not least, I'm disappointed because we have some very good pictures, and we have a good team which is working on them, and it's particularly frustrating for everyone concerned. I think it's frustrating for the team who can't be seen to be doing good work. It's irritating for the press who can't understand what we're doing, and for the general public to be proud of what their nation is doing. All of that's very frustrating, but I'm afraid it's just the way it is. All of the work that we're now doing is secret, and we just can't go there. So, no pictures, but I do want to cover two themes. The first of those is to expand a bit more on what Simon was saying about the reason why we think you need to design a new submarine. And if you do need to do that, the second issue is how would you go about it, and how do you get that with reasonable risk and sensible program. So, I think, see if I can make this work. Okay, so as he says, this particular phrase, which is entirely reasonable phrase formed by the people who framed the options, meant one thing to them, and it's meant a whole sort of other things to other people. So this is for the benefit of everyone who's not the submarine we're designing, this is a supercavitating, futuristic bit of science fiction about a high-speed underwater vehicle. I think an aircraft designer must have been involved in this because it's clearly not what we're looking at. The other thing we're doing is we're not retreading some old-fashioned, out-of-date submarine. Although in defense of this particular submarine, it is, in fact, Holland 1. It is the basis for all submarines that are currently running around in our oceans. And as such is a very... Now, I heard claims about French, British, American first. I think this guy was an Irishman. So just... So you just have to be very careful as to who did what first. But this is the first modern submarine, and all submarines have been evolved from that. Okay, so if that's not what we're doing, what are we doing? We're doing a conventional submarine developed from known working designs. We're doing it with support, which we're receiving from a number of nations. We're getting design data, we're getting standards, we're getting processes. We're having peer reviews and guidance on what we should be doing. We have joint R&D programs, we have foreign military sales agreements, and we have armament collaboration agreements. So, and we also have some key staff, as Simon says. We're English, or some of us are. Okay, so we have all of that support, and so that's what we're trying to do. Why would you want to do it? So we think there is a unique requirement. It starts from the position of the regional superiority. If you want a regionally superior conventional submarine, there's no point. I think by definition, you can't buy what's out there in the marketplace. Simon talked quite eloquently, I think, on the issue of legislation, regulation, and standards. And those issues we're exploring in some depth at the moment. The remoteness and reliability issue, I think, is one that's underestimated. I think if you're in a war or in a period of tension, and you're in Australia, it seems a very long way away from any of your strategic allies. It is a long way away. And that places demands on the submarine for reliability and for the nation to be self-sustaining in a way which others don't. And I guess that's why so much emphasis has been put, and we're benefiting so much from the Coles review in re-establishing the reliability of our current submarine capability. So, interoperability with our strategic allies is absolutely fundamental to the basis of how we're securing our future in the Pacific. And everyone has talked today eloquently about the range and endurance issue. I don't think I need to say more about that. It is a long way to where we want to operate. And submarines are offensive weapons, as Greg Samet talked about. And the best place to do that is up threat. So all of those issues determine, in my mind, and I think in many others, that we are in an area of a unique requirement. So that demands a unique solution. So back to the issue of affordability and cost challenge. If we start at the right-hand end of this and work backwards through this diagram, establishing best value for money submarine for Australia requires you to do cost capability trade-offs. That is how you derive that understanding in a highly complex and unique environment. That in turn, at the top sort of line of this, requires you to understand costs of design, build, and sustaining any of those assets. And to do that, you need to understand the cost base and the drivers. And it's that work that we're doing at the moment to understand what the connection between design options and costs are. And it's really important to also to understand the design options that are available to you, obviously, and the design team that we have operating is currently doing that. The second thing you need to do is to be able to assess the collective benefit of several measures of effectiveness. So, what do I mean by that? Submarines are offensive weapons. They do a number of things. So, some measures of effectiveness are things like kill probability. Others are vulnerability to detection. Those sort of issues, and it does several tasks, so there are several of those. So you have to find a way of amalgamating a number and take a view on the collective benefit of several of those measures of effectiveness. So clearly, if you're going to do that, you need to be able to understand them, and you need to understand the operational environment and the strategic goals that you're trying to operate under. So, and within that, obviously the current and future threat environment. This is the operational analysis that we've been talking about. It's fundamental to getting the best value for money out of that you can for Australia, and it's fundamental to understanding the benefit that this submarine capability gives you. Unfortunately, for this discussion, even the questions here are secret, let alone the answers. So that's why we find it very difficult to talk about the outcome of that sort of process. So, if we understand the design, we can make intelligent choices about the trade space that we're working in. So what does that trade space look like? A bit vague on this screen. The reference design, what we're really talking about there is our current capability. And the axis, the vertical axis, is net effectiveness. So that's that collection of goodness. What benefit does it give you in terms of being effective in doing the roles that you're seeking to do? And the horizontal axis is the physical capability of the submarine. So it's noise level, its speed, its dived endurance, its indiscretion ratio, and so on. So this, as you'll understand, this diagram is somewhat sort of hypothetical. It's not exact axes, but it gives you the idea that as time goes on and the increasing threat becomes apparent to you, then your existing reference capability will slowly slide down and will eventually disappear out below the threshold of concern, threshold of capability. So you have to keep running to stand still. And the solution space that we're looking for in the future lies somewhere between those thresholds and target values and requires you to be better than you are at the moment to stand still. The very faint lozenge is intended to represent the sort of area of physical possible submarines that you might work with. So, you've got to understand the design to ensure the upgrade path to maintain capability edge. So Simon went through this area really quite effectively. The Oberon class with the sovereignty for safety quite clearly with the UK, mostly with Sweden to start with for Collins, but becoming Australian. And our view that with the legislative position and the necessary reaction to that in terms of the seaworthiness programme requires you to understand that design particularly well. And we're working very closely with the seaworthiness team to understand those responsibilities to acquit our sovereign Australian safety responsibilities. So, this is a through-life issue. You could start anywhere on this circle, but I'll start with the one that I think I'm tasked to do. I'm tasked to provide a submarine that can fight and win in the maritime environment. That requires you to acquire assets, it requires you to maintain those assets, And to do that, you need to maintain both the customer capability and the industrial base, and all the fundamental inputs to capability, including research and development, tactics, training, and all the other aspects. And you've got to do that staying secure. So this is an enduring capability. It requires you to plan into the future and to remain secure while you're doing it. It's not a one-off procurement in which you can put a number on in terms of dollars, or indeed in terms of boats, as we were discussing earlier. So if you're going to do that, then I would suggest that we need to find a way of doing it which manages the risk and contains that risk and the associated cost that goes with it. So the first thing that RAND provides a really good way of addressing the state of what is out there at the moment. I think it sometimes finds it struggles a little bit to understand what could be, and that's far more, you'll find out far more about that in the boardrooms of the industrial companies, and I guess on the top levels of in Canberra. So, so the first thing you need to do in our view, in RAND's view, is that you need to address this as a strategic program. You need to go beyond a single acquisition. You need to have an integrated enterprise, and I welcome the way in which the Minister this morning talked about that. Secondly, you need to set the operational requirements in a solid way and not be too optimistic. I think the presentation we heard from Admiral Duché was absolutely spot on that. You need to have the right level of ambition in what you're doing with your submarine. Not too much, not too little, the right level of ambition. And you need to reduce those risks by clearly stating the performance, and you need to not push the technology too far. And you certainly need to leave, once you've set them, you need to leave them alone. And I'll be talking a little bit more later about the batch procurement strategy which we've been developing and really has been the sort of background to the whole of the C1000 view of life. And that allows you to take a sensible, measured view of what that first batch of submarines might be. Because if you, clearly, if you were only going to have one design of submarine for the next 50 years, then there would be an enormous temptation to try and squeeze everything you ever were going to want into that submarine. As it is, we're looking at relatively short batches of submarines, and there are good precedents for that in the way in which the US is tackling their affordable submarine program in Virginia, and in the way the Japanese work with their relatively short batches of evolving submarines. I think that should be an evolution between batches, not a new design every time, and certainly not a sort of complete change in plan. And I'll be talking a little bit more about how we work that. Right, I'll try and speed up a bit to keep people on board. In terms of acquisition and contracting, I think we've heard quite a lot today about the need for an enterprise solution and collaborative open working. RAND's really firm on that, and we've heard about UK, about French, and about US ways of working with that, and I believe other countries have found that to be the best way. So the competitive, aggressive, competitive procurement strategies, which in theory would provide good value for money, don't in this situation. Most people find that you have to go to this sort of collaborative environment in order to get the best out of the world. So the next bit I'm going to talk about is the design, build, and sustainment, because that's really the sort of bit that I do. And so, pressing on, where are we at the moment? We're right at the start of this process. We're looking at Australian submarine solution space. We are working hand in glove with the Capability Development Group to understand that measure of the right level of ambition for what our submarine should be. And we expect to drive towards a single solution in time to start what we might call initial design or preliminary design in the sort of timescales that Simon discussed. So, anything we're doing at the moment is, in essence, exploring that solution space. It's not making sort of finalized decisions, but it should educate us all in what that affordable capability should be. So, we're starting a long program. We're building capability. I should say that the team that we've developed is already bigger than I need to deliver the simple outputs. The straightforward answer to what I was asked to do in the first place. And that's been a planned risk reduction exercise so that as we work through this program, we are creating the necessary capability which will be needed even just to manage a program properly, but particularly if we move into executing our own design. So what does that team look like? Simon gave you a few figures. We're a year old last month. I joined a week after Simon. We've been operational since September. We're 50 plus. As Simon says, it is a variable feast. Of those, we have 10 from the DMO. And I must say here that they've been exceptionally effective team members in a way which we found more difficult in the UK when Simon and I did this activity the same. We have 2 from the Navy, and those are absolutely invaluable to us in keeping our feet on the ground. We have a link to the DSTO, but in fact we're working hand in glove with the DSTO on a whole range of issues in things like signatures, in operation analysis, structures and so on. So this is not representative of DSTO's influence on this program. And one of the real joys in coming to Australia 3 years ago was to find a really effective long-term R&D, as I would call it, or S&T strategy, and those activities going on ahead of the program for the submarine. And that's absolutely vital in de-risking this type of program. We have 37 industrial secondees, and that's exactly how we are. We are not company people operating there. We are seconded into the organization, and there is a really remarkable lack of company badging within the team. We are best for team, and we work that. Of the 41 companies on the panel, we so far used 10. We would like more, but just from a point of view of reaching out and getting the best in the industry. But I have to say, some companies are very much better at reading what we're asking for than others, and they tend to win. And it is a competitive position to get the right people into that team. So we have an organization, a work breakdown structure, a plan. We have deliverables, governance and review. And I think quite surprising to some people, we hold ourselves up to review on a regular basis. And Simon was talking about the peer review, and that is quite arduous. Rather truncated. We've lost half the organisation. Nonetheless, the point there really was just to say we have a perfectly normal ship submarine design team, but we also have industrial teams. We have cost and risk and program, as you would expect to see in any design team. So we've made the right start, I believe, in building the capability for Australia. We've got a long way to go, and that is a risk. the capability to continue to develop that program to fully design a submarine in Australia is something which requires management attention, and it requires, and therefore you would regard it as a risk. The strategy which we're adopting of pre-building the size of the team to drive it forward, we're testing that strategy, and we're testing the resolve of companies, and we're testing the availability of capability. So far, so good. So what else do you need to, and I'll speed up a bit if I can. You need a whole bunch of things to make a good submarine design concept. We've got them all in that team, and we've been extremely pleased in the way in which that's developed. We've got the base data, the key requirements, technical knowledge and expertise. Go back again to safety. Safety is fundamental. It's right at the heart of our organization, and it drives our technical choices. We have cost modeling capability. We're developing our technical standards. We have validated and approved robust calculation models covering all of the usual things that you would expect. And with the exception of proprietary tools, we've built those models ourselves from scratch. And it's a testament to the caliber of people, and as you see, mostly Australians, that have allowed us to do that. And we go through an absolutely classic design spiral. PowerPoint isn't very good at doing spirals, so this is obviously a series of circles. But it actually is quite telling in that we move from one level to the next through a review process, and that's really quite important. So we have a design understanding with the right models, processes, data, and people, of course. So Simon said I would talk a bit about the design brief. We talk about this quite a lot. It's a fairly unique thing. It's something we tried first when Simon and I were leading the similar team for the UK successor program. And it encapsulates a number of things. The first is the engineering management plans, the design vision, the safety management, the engineering management plan, and stakeholder engagement plans, the typical top-level issues which guide a program. So we're developing those plans ahead of where we're going. We're developing a series of design strategies which look at the transverse issues of safety, design margins, signatures, etc. And that's how you deal with those issues across the piece. And we're developing a series of design instructions which allow us system by system to understand what should be designed in that area. And they capture both the requirements, the standards, the function that that's supposed to do, and the role that it plays, and a little bit more about that in a minute. And we encapsulate all of that lot in illustrative designs, which we're developing, and those are the output from that in the design brief is effectively what in the UK we'd call a book of calculations. It's an encapsulation of all the design information which you develop in doing a full concept design. So all of that is coming forward. It's strung together by something which I haven't got a slide for here, but by the use of a functional model. And that functional model links the top-level requirements. It links the safety goals and satisfaction arguments in a single model down through into the top of those design instructions. So those design instructions, from that series of items which that system is supposed to do, you can understand why it's doing it in terms of requirements and why it's doing it in terms of safety goals. And that's absolutely vital. It's an encapsulation of that rather ephemeral but fundamental design intent that we need to have in designing our submarine. So those things transfer through into the more normal, full, it becomes the detailed design, ship spec, and the project management and engineering management plans. And we're beginning to develop those plans and processes as we go. So it's option agnostic. It will provide client control for any option that we do. But clearly, as Simon said, we're preparing ourselves for doing the design ourselves. So The only thing you could say about this slide is this is not any of the options that we're pushing forward, so no need to get your microscopes out and try and understand what the design is. It's just about my last slide, you'll be glad to know. So what are we doing? We are developing a sovereign capability, providing a world-class, reliable SSK to excel at its required role. It's designed by Australians for Australia, but crucially with significant support, and that support we're getting. It's based on a clear, stable, underwritten capability requirement, and we're working hard to get to that particular part of the thing under control. And I've mentioned the batch procurement, really fundamental in terms of controlling, particularly on the initial design, the level of risk in that program. We must design something and then build it in that order and without too much overlap in order to control that risk. And we're creating that battle-winning competitive edge with offshore support in terms of design process, some design quirks, and in some cases in terms of equipment. And we're really sticking very hard, and my designers hate me for it, but to off-the-shelf proven equipment. Why am I so strung up on that? And the reason is that one of the big drivers that I've seen in the programs I've been involved in for the design taking longer than you thought it would, for getting late and ending up bigger than you ever thought it could be, is that the design information is not solid when you take choices. So when you make choices, you really want the solid information that you get from having existing equipment. That's absolutely fundamental to controlling risk in program. And so we have to be modest in our ambitions, get the right level of ambition, and the batch procurement will allow you to evolve those in a stable environment for each batch. Absolutely critical that we understand how to migrate from one batch to the other without a total redesign of Submarine. And that is perhaps the most complex, theoretically challenging bit of the work that we're doing at the moment. We have strategic support to the design in processes and in products. So I couldn't really resist giving you some sort of understanding of what that vision looks like. And this is it. The same as our American colleague gave you, except because we're that bit ahead in Australia, it isn't sunset yet, but it will be soon. This is how our submarine should look like. It should be silent and deadly, and it should be, and we should not be addressing it at all. So thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I wish I could have been more open about the caliber of the design. And I guess one final point, I could be telling you a whole lot of fibs about where we've got to. So why should you believe me? A few senior industrialists have been round to look at what we're doing, and people are perfectly at liberty to come and ask us what we're doing and talk to us. And provided they've got the right clearance, I can show them what's going on. And in general, the response has been, my goodness, I didn't think you could possibly have got that far that quickly. And I think it's a testament to the Australian team that they're able to pull that sort of surprise. In much more detail and much more sort of personal angst from me is the US peer review team who were here last in February. And they read, I think, upwards of 40 documents. They provided 400 detailed comments on those. And I think gave us a lot of encouragement that we were heading in the right direction. And they report to David Gould. They don't report to me or to Simon. So we are, in the right circumstances, open to review. at the end of that, I said to it, well, that was extremely useful. Thank you very much. And one of the leading Americans said to me, I asked him, look, overall, then, how do you think it's going? And he said, you're doing all the right things, Chris. Just do more of it. And I'm off to do more of it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I think special recognition to both of you is deserved for the fact that you took the efforts of preparing these statements with the high barriers of classification, as we learned. Virtually, you couldn't say much, but you gave us a lot of interesting insights anyway, and kept the attention of the audience for more than 1 hour with a very well-made presentation. So thank you very much again. I understand that the classification barrier also applies, of course, for the answers to any questions from the audience.
Absolutely does.
So I would invite the audience to either ask questions or to give comments. Maybe comments would help also. Please.
Thank you, Andrew Davies from ASPI. I'd like to thank the two of you for your perspectives on the brand new developmental project option for IPT.
Thank you.
Now, gentlemen, I understand the politics of numbers, but let me put something to you. If you're talking about an enduring design and construction capability, and we're talking about platforms that are going to have a lifetime of 25 years minimum, and you would need to be putting out one boat every 2 years at an absolute minimum, we're talking 12 plus boats to support this program, aren't we?
Wonderful. Potentially, the answer is yes. So when I said that we'll be working hard over the next year to understand what the minimum build rate and design refresh rate required to sustain, to provide that enduring capability to which the Minister referred this morning, that is one of the, that's one of the drivers. It's your assertion that it's one every 2 years. You could see from the French experience, which I think is 10 boats, and from the UK enterprise at the moment, which is 11, that's 7 astutes and 4 BNs, that they're facing exactly the same problem. So the answer is that it may well be that, this is just not for me to say. I just don't wish to play into this political space at all, but if you're asking advice on what is required to sustain an enduring capability, then you have to take those things into account. And we will do some detailed work and make some detailed analysis of the things that drive you to a drumbeat of once every 24 months, once every 27, 30, or maybe even 36 months, which will directly influence those numbers. Our understanding of the Japanese program is that they manage their submarine enterprise on that basis, and then they determine how many of those submarines they actually wish to use at any one time. That's clearly an option that's available to Australia, and I think it's too early to have that discussion.
The next question is here in the third row.
Chris Skinner, I'd like to congratulate both the presenters on a very clear exposition in spite of the difficulty of classification and so on. I learned an enormous amount. Your PR isn't all that good though. If some of the messages could have got out beforehand, I wouldn't need to make the apology for totally misunderstanding your relationship with option 4. My question though is, how is the independent assessment made of the ultimate operational capability? I was very gratified to hear you say the US peer review team, they read all the documents, they bring enormous experience, and they report to David Gould. Fine. Who is reporting to the chief of the capability development group on what is the estimate of the operational capability that will be created?
Is that you or me?
I don't know. I'll say something. Just the team that we're running with has a leg of the capability development group within it. So we are working absolutely hand in glove with CDG to understand what those choices are within that space that I was talking about, cost-benefit analysis. So they understand that it's their choice as much as ours as to what ends up in there. The technical assessment of how good the submarine is against the measures of effectiveness is being worked with the support of DSTO, both in technical assessment and in terms of the horizontal axis, i.e. the performance, and in terms of the effectiveness, which was the vertical axis of my rather lozenge-shaped diagram. So that's a cohesive team reporting through to CDG.
I'll just add a bit to that, because it was a bit of a joke that when we started, that running the equivalence team in the UK, it was considered to be an offence to draw pictures of submarines inside the team, because that's not what we were about. We were about producing a design brief, and the documentation suite that you saw Chris illustrate there was actually the real output. But I did concede eventually that it was necessary to have some illustration of what a solution might look like. But I did want to stop enthusiastic engineers running away, wasting an awful lot of time drawing pictures that had no real purpose, and they had to buy cakes for the entire team if they were caught doing it. But in this event, of course, we are producing illustrations of point solutions, and we need them for a number of reasons. We actually have to have something that we can look at and feel and touch to be able to form a view about cost estimates, and also illustrations of the way in which the submarine is likely to be put together, so that we can get a really good feel for build schedule. But last but not least, we need those physical representations of submarine concepts and concept designs and point solutions to be able to assess performance. And associated with that, as part of any submission process to government, we would expect a whole framework of assurance to provide guarantees and assurance to government that what we're saying is founded on some fact. And at the moment, we are going through a process with the wide stakeholder group inside the department to understand how we put that together. It's something that we're absolutely used to in the UK, and is less common practice here in Australia, because most equipment are procured off the shelf. We did talk briefly, and it was said that I was going to in my speech, about operational analysis. We are putting together an operational analysis suite in order for us to be able to translate those performance estimates into measures of effectiveness and measures of capability that will read across directly to the top-level requirements that are promulgated and agreed and negotiated with the Capability Development Group. That is the link that we're trying to create. And in putting that together, particularly with the DSTO, and in consultation with the Navy and CDG, we are also putting together the independent assurance and regime and the validation processes, again to provide that level of assurance that what we're saying has some real substance.
We had another question over there. I don't know who was first, please. Yeah.
Carl Claxton from ASPI. Chris, this was only a small part of your talk, but it's an assumption we haven't really teased out today. You did talk a bit about the benefit of submarines acting very aggressively up threat to maintain the initiative.
Yeah.
But there are strategists, including some in this room, who feel that it's possible to punch too far above your weight, and perhaps we should leave ripping the arms off nuclear-powered giants in their own home waters to other giants. So submarine enthusiasts generally dismiss the crocodile in the moat option with a wave of the hands. Could you just please, for a couple of minutes, demolish the idea of why operating in closer choke points can't be a perfectly respectable contribution to the alliance and to Australia's defence self-reliance?
No, I can't. I thought if you listen to Admiral Sammett's discussion today, I think he went as far as I thought you could in explaining that issue. And I I have some personal views about it. Others have other views. I quite understand that. At the moment, my remit is to design a relatively long-legged submarine, just like Collins is a relatively long-legged submarine.
Next question, please.
Just had a quick question in terms of a bit of clarification on the requirement for the submarines. A few times we've heard the term sort of regionally superior and dominant submarine. Now, I'm assuming we're talking about establishing a regionally dominant and superior submarine capability rather than just focusing on the platform. But I'd be interested in a view from either of the speakers as far as what's the definition of region? Because obviously, whether you're benchmarking against a Southeast Asian, an East Asian, or dare I say an Indo-Pacific capability, is a very different thing across those three areas. So when we talk about regionally dominant and superior, what are we actually talking about?
Just bear with me. So as I think Chris indicated, it's not necessarily for us to be able to answer this, but what we can give is our understanding. So it is a political requirement, and it was in the Minister's speech, for the underlying principle to deliver an enduring, regionally superior conventional future submarine capability. And elsewhere, I think he spoke about maintaining that capability, which means we have it now with Collins. For us, we are targeting, as we said, a capability that is contemporary Collins, which gives an indication that we believe that we're broadly happy with the capability that we have now. Sorry, that's not we, that means Australia. That's not us in the IPT. That is the Navy and Defence generally. So I think in answer to the question, it's the same as Collins can deliver now. And I can't say any more than that. Maybe there's somebody else in the audience who would like to, but it's certainly beyond my remit.
There was another question over there.
Frank Owen, Sovereign Institute of Australia, and James Fisher Defence, and a former submariner. So I put my question to Chris in regard to your design brief and the process, which I quite understand, and I applaud the focus on safety, having quite a background in that aspect of submarines. The trap that I see over the years of observing submarine designs is that there are tubes that get filled up with equipment, and then there's some decisions are taken to fit people in around them, and also escape and survival philosophies, or a kit. And Collins at the moment is groaning with extra safety equipment because of decisions on rush escape, or how long they might have to survive on board, and what intervention systems might be there. And given that they have such a big impact on the design, particularly on habitability, are those aspects rolled up in the safety, which is really about minimising and avoiding hazards, or is it one of the design lines that comes under, etc.?
Okay, I can answer that in two ways. The first is that I'm delighted to say that the very first illustrative design safety meeting was on the subject of subdivision and escape. So it's absolutely fundamental to the process we're going under. It is, it has quite a dominant effect, and we think one of the fundamental issues which will drive us to a new design, because of the so far as reasonably practical, will drive you to provide more facilities than we have in the past. The second part of it is just to have a little dig at my friend here about why you have to draw submarines in this business as well as do design briefs. You have not got any capability until you've got a solution. A lot of people would like to sort of say, how much does land strike cost, or how much does an extra 2 knots cost? You have to have a holistic solution that works at least at that first level of the design spiral. before you know you've got any solution at all. So first of all, fundamental to our that escape and rescue issue is fundamental to our position of where we want to drive the submarine. Secondly, unless it all fits into the tube in a cohesive fashion, you haven't got a solution anyway, and you need to get that far to understand what the solution is, how much it costs, and indeed to a certain extent how long it will take you to get it.
And my supplementary is actually not in relation to that. It's actually answering the crocodile in the moat. From my perspective, a submarine's capability is represented by the fact that it's an unknown. Sometimes it's been cast as a strategic sting that might be the blue-ringed octopus you step upon accidentally. But if you know where the submarine is to begin with, you can sidestep it. And that's why a submarine is not a crocodile in the moat.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, oh, there's one.
You didn't mention anything in particular about reducing the cost of ownership as part of the design process. And since you spend 3 or 4 times as much as looking after it as acquiring it, and certainly experienced in other parts of the business, reducing the cost of ownership should be a major driver. So I just wondered what you say about that.
Thank you, John. As I put my foot on the accelerator, noticing that it had already gone 5 o'clock, I skipped over that design spiral. But if I hadn't skipped it so fast, you would have seen right at the heart of it is safety and sustainment. So absolutely fundamental to getting that right. And we have quite an eminent team who have a lot of experience of both the UK and Australia sustainment already working in the team, and they make their presence felt, and they should do so. They have the right plans for how to engender the right enterprise, the right products to support the sustainment effort, and they're also badgering us already about the decisions we're taking, even at this illustrative design stage, about how that would affect the supportability of the submarine. They know they won't win all of them, but they will make an effect.
Okay, thank you very much. We are coming close to 1:30, but still have 2 minutes left, so maybe that gives room for one question I have. Finally, actually in Simon Todd's presentation, it was mentioned that there are, to my understanding, very broad terms for the tasking of the IPT. If I quote correctly, you said you have to deliver procurement strategies for whatever option the government may choose. On the other hand, I understood that you have a clear understanding how to put together the industry group on the tier 1 level, to which the designer does not belong. That was my understanding, but that's exactly the question. Did I understand correctly? And if it is like that, doesn't that limit the options too much right from the beginning?
So we are just about to start a consultation process with industry. And that consultation process is exactly about finding the most appropriate procurement strategy and commercial arrangements and organisation to deliver this programme. And at the moment, nothing is ruled out.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have reached 1:30 sharp. Thanks again to the speakers.